in Lord Lesson's inquiry that how powerful some of the media groups became in the United Kingdom when we saw two Prime Ministers complaining that they came to see them, and once they refused to change their policy on Europe and other issues, they said that we are going to damage you, and they did damage at least one Prime Minister, and the second one had guts to challenge them. So he always compromised. And we saw that the media when they become very powerful, and we are discussing it today, they sometimes abuse and blackmail and misuse their power as well. In Pakistan, we have recently seen that Lord Ahmed, who was suspended from Labour Party, he was wrongly quoted in a newspaper, and then the Labour Party was sent that clipping of newspaper, and he was suspended. Thank you if you can switch off your mobiles. Thank you for reminding me that there are mobiles nowadays in use. Either switch off or put them on silence. When he was misquoted actually, and the day before yesterday, he was reinstated by the Labour Party, and now he is a full member of Labour Party. I hope he will come and he will speak about his experience, because this is not the first time he has been done with media in a lot of other times as well. And then what is happening in Pakistan since last 4 years and previously as well, the Chief Justice of Supreme Court has taken suo motu action on media reports, and he has virtually replaced a Prime Minister with another one because in contempt of court. But he took first of all in steel mill corruption cases, and he stopped steel mill to be privatized during last government. And in this government, he is taking a lot of cases, whether they are mess management or they are other cases. He takes it on, and then I want to also welcome you all, especially the children and the young people from USA, with Dr. David Davis, who is here on a visit, and he has come here and he will say a few words at some stage about his trip, and he will also introduce himself. But I was saying that in democracy, the media becomes too powerful, and when there is a dictatorship or kingdom, the countries where there is a kingdom or there is a dictatorship, media becomes very obedient to their rulers or their actors. And I think we have seen what social media can play role in 21st century. We have seen Arab Spring, we have seen other part of the world in China as well, where the media is playing important role in changing the society. Previously in Pakistan, in India, Asia, where there are not very educated people, what was the issue was when print media was printing a news, people needed somebody who can read it for them. So they will gather around and somebody will read the news. Nowadays, through radio, through TV, they don't need to read. Illiterate people or uneducated people can also listen to the media reports, and they can understand what is happening. So the whole emphasis is changed from print media to electronic media, whether it is radio or it is TV. So I think we are here today, and I've got wonderful two speakers who are very experienced, young senior journalists from BBC and Commonwealth Journalist Association. So we will listen to them, but first I wanted to welcome you all into this debate and discussion, and I hope that we can throw a light on what is happening in the media and how can we influence this, or how can we get, as a political activist or workers. First speaker will be Lord Qurban Hussain, who has booked this room kindly for us, but he is also Vice Chairman of All Party Parliamentary Group. So can I ask Lord Qurban Hussain, Lord Hussain of Luton, to welcome you all and speak briefly on the role of the media in democracy.
Thank you, Mr. Lashari. Ladies and gentlemen, children, welcome here today in the House of Lords. Since being the only person from House of Lords, I can formally welcome you on behalf of the whole House. Many of you may have had the first experience of coming to the House of Lords, particularly the young people who may not have had the opportunity of coming to this House before. This House is a very unique House in many ways, although in many countries, democracies, you have upper houses. which are normally elected one way or the other. But some of you may know, and others would be perhaps surprised to know that the House of Lords in this country is not an elected house as such. It is a nominated house. So more than 800 members of this house are all nominated people. Albeit many of them are time-served politicians who have had been in the government or in the parliament for many, many, many years, and when they took retirement from the parliament, they were asked to come and sit in the House of Lords and give their expert advice. So that is one reason for the nomination, that they get these experts for various fields to give when they are, whilst the responsibility of the House of Commons is to make laws, the House of Lords, like many other houses, upper houses in the world, is to scrutinise the legislation the Parliament passes. So that's the role basically that, and this is particularly a little sort of information for young people who may not have possibly gathered this when they came to this house. In any case, the subject here today is the role of media in democracy. A few points that I want to touch upon in my few minutes briefing. Mustafa al-Ashari has stolen the thunder. He's talked about the things that I wanted to talk about, but nevertheless, let me say that media, particularly in modern days, can play, and in many ways does play, a very active role in the democratic rights of people throughout the world, whether it is print media, whether it's electronic media or social media. We have seen, and Arab Spring is the latest example of that, and in many other countries indeed. Sometimes you don't get to hear about things, and normally the governments would like to put a very rosy picture to the world when the media can dig up some of the things which the government would not want to tell anybody out there. And let me give you a very good example that I can relate to, for example. Some of you may know. Some of you may, and this is an example that I'm going to give you how media can actually change the view of the people or perception of the country. We all know, for example, India, our good friend of Britain, the largest democracy on earth, as proclaimed. And personally, I admire such a huge country, democratic country, with all sorts of people. Every religion in the world lives in India, and every color and creed lives in India, and it's a democracy as well. But one thing that the media has done, even in a country like India, the unidentified graves of people in Kashmir, killed, who knows who killed them, but thousands of them. The government will not go and tell anybody in the world that there were some mass graves in Kashmir, but it was the Indian media who went to those villages when they came to know that there are mass graves in here. And only in the recent years, I'm talking about the last 2 or 3 years. And there are thousands of people, unknown people, buried there. Because it's a mountainous range, because it's isolated area, and people don't get to hear what actually goes on in those areas. And local people then come out with stories and tell them that this was the army who came in, or whoever came in, and they had an encounter in this, that, the other, and people are being killed by the forces. This is what one side of the story is. We don't know. We don't know what the real story is, and whether we will ever know, because unless those cases are investigated, nobody will know who those people are, who is buried there. The fact is, yes, there are people buried in hundreds of places with thousands of bodies in it, but we don't know who they are. So this is one little example that I was giving to you, that what role the media can play actually to uncover some of the things that otherwise people will never get to know about those. And similarly, some of the dictators in the world who have oppressed their people so much, and if it wasn't for media, the grip of the dictators has been so sort of harsh that nobody will hear anything what goes on in those countries. But therefore, it is a very important role that the media has. But nevertheless, I think there needs to be some rationale, and there has to be some moral and other regulations to regulate media as well. You can't have media actually going around and showing the images. Some of the images, I have to say, Mr. Bashari, I wasn't very impressed with some of the media reports from Pakistan, for example. Okay, crime do get committed all over the world, but if a crime is committed, there's no use keep repeating it again and again and again and 35 times a day. It's not, those major reporting television stations, some of them are known all around the world, but what they are doing is one crime which has been committed is being reported 35 times a day, and nothing else but crimes are reported. Well, is that a crime reporting television station, or do they have other news as well? So you don't, and here, for example, let me give you an example here as well, what I'm trying to say. Some years ago, we went to Pakistan with a few friends. I used to be councillor at the time, and it was a council-led delegation, and we had the local police with us as well. And we have had a reception in one of the districts in Pakistan, and the local police chief comes and gives us a representation and statistics on the crime levels in that district. And it's a huge district, much bigger than my hometown Luton, for example. And here all the documentation was handwritten, because over there, I'm talking about 10, 12 years ago, and they hadn't had computers or anything to do anything, so everything was manually written there, and he had to put the big book in front of us in order for us to read out. So they were not statistics brought up for us; they were their records. So I could see that at least it's a general record, and the numbers that they came up with, or the numbers that we could read. More crimes were committed in one night in my hometown, Luton, than the crimes committed in that district in the whole month. Now, yet, the perception about those areas in Pakistan, here in UK, due to the media reports, ARY and GO and others and whatever, is my children would not want to visit Pakistan. Oh, Dad, don't you see what's going on in Pakistan? All these crimes are committed in such large numbers, and we can't go there. Now, that is exaggeration. That's one thing that the media needs to take care of, not to exaggerate things and put them in such a picture that outside world gets a distorted picture of a particular area or a particular country. And the other thing is, of course, here, when a crime scene is reported, you won't see, God forbid, let's talk about, say, 7/7 or whatever. The media was not allowed, or the media would not go and show the bodies or the body parts littered around and everything. There's a limit what they show, and if they do, they say, well, there are certain images which might be disturbing. So there's a they pre-warn the viewers. But what happens in many countries, in Pakistan, for example, they will get a close-up of the accidental, or whatever, injured bodies they may be, or killed people, or whatever, in an accident, or whatever. So they need to be properly trained. And in countries like Pakistan, one thing that I have to say is, in the recent years, the television stations that we used to know up to about 5 years ago, or maybe 10, there only used to be one or two television stations, and they were all sprung up in the last few years. And there is a lack of training on the part of those people who are running those media stations, and therefore they're not properly trained. And what I do urge the governments in those countries is to make sure that the people who actually are running these television stations or other media centers, they are properly trained, and so they're told about reporting and the moral and the legal obligations that they have, as well as just reporting. With that, Mustaq Lashari and friends, I've got to leave, I've got to go to another meeting. I did say to Mustaq Lashari that I've got to be out of this meeting within 20 minutes, and therefore I'm awfully sorry that I cannot stay much longer with you. I hope you have a good meeting, and those who have traveled from abroad, I hope you have a good time while you're here.
We hope that you will come back for whenever you can. I want to welcome a few more people. Very senior journalist from Germany, Shakil Durrani Sahib is here. I'm very pleased. Shakil Chugtai Sahib is here with his children who are become his partial photographer as well. I'm very thankful to Amir Saidi from Iran, who's from Alawi community, and a few other friends from that. I'm also welcoming Barrister Subhat Qadri QC, who is the first QC of Muslim and Pakistani origin in this country. Habib Jan Sahib is here. So I welcome you all once again, and I hope I also particularly welcome Yasmin Qureshi, Member of Parliament from Bolton, who is here. And I hope the Member of Parliament Lords will come and go, so don't worry about them. We are the people who are going to put them in or out of this Parliament, not the Lords, but Member of Parliament. So the media is very important, and I think we are discussing a very important. Can I now invite, I want to also tell you that once speaker has spoken, and I've got a couple of speakers, then you will be asking questions to the speaker, you will be becoming part of this debate. So I hope you stay and ask questions. Also, the lady from Kazakhstan, am I right? She is a very identical dressing, so you can see she's sitting there. And I'm thankful for her to come. Dave, another Member of Parliament, David Hussain, our chairman of All Party Parliamentary Group, is here. So he will be, I think, hopefully staying all the meeting. So he will be the last to conclude. Come in wherever you can get a seat or wherever. Welcome. Can I invite now Rita Payne, who is a very senior journalist. She is at the moment president of Commonwealth Journalist Association, and she was one of the instruments to get me my main speaker tonight as well. And she worked very hard on raising the issues of journalists wherever it happens. She's now, as I said, president of Commonwealth Journalist Association. So can I invite Rita Payne to speak on the subject of the role of media in a democracy?
Good evening. Good evening to you all, and to you all for coming, and to Mushtaq for organising this discussion. I ought to say at the outset that I don't consider myself to be an authority. I feel I'm learning every day. And as a journalist, I do like to hear what other people think, what other people say. And I do worry that, there can be a sense sometimes with media, or some people may see themselves as the ultimate authority, they have all the answers, and we do not have all the answers. What I would like to do is I will just throw out some observations this evening to open thoughts up for the discussion later on. And I'm glad I've got William Horsley, my colleague here. We worked at the BBC together many years ago, and I consider William to be the guru on anything to do with media freedom. He doesn't have a white horse yet, but he will go and say journalists under threat in various countries. He's played a very important role in advising countries in Europe especially, and he's been visiting, he's worked with the European Parliament to talk about the code of ethics, video, etc. regulations. Now, these are just some of my observations. From the Levison inquiry, from the current scandal in Pakistan where 19 well-known anchors are alleged to have taken bribes and favours from a property tycoon. And on top of that, it becomes even more interesting, is it's alleged that the media company for which the majority of the anchors work is now running ads, very complimentary by the judiciary. So the judiciary will be kind to them. So we have strange twists and turns. You have the concerns about paid journalism in India, where it said that politicians will pay journalists, and the more they pay, the more likely they'll be to be interviewed. So there are certain ways things are distorted. But from all of this, there is no doubt that the media is important, and this is why we have all the stories and the scandals unfolding at the moment. What we must also remember, and I'm sure that William will elaborate on this later on, is that when we talk about media hacking and the current Levison inquiry and how the whole story unfolded, it was actually another media organisation which actually exposed the scandal. So we mustn't forget that either, that the media itself is checking on the media and reporting. And there are a lot of things that we need as journalists to keep reminding ourselves. And what I often try and do is explain to people who are not familiar with the media that, you know, if there isn't just one media, as I know that in a room like this, you can have a range of people. So you have a range of media. You can have the good, the bad, and the ugly. What we should do, and what we try to aspire to do, especially I'm really talking about my experience at the BBC, is we want to aim for the best standards of journalism, which would be impartiality, accuracy, wherever and however it could be achieved. And in the recent coverage, you will see maybe some of the worst of phone hacking, which was that scandal journalism. You've seen the best, when Marie Colvin, the journalist, died reporting on what was going on in Syria. So it's very, very complex, like life is complex. Now, again, William and I were here yesterday at a meeting on the protection of journalists. And one of the speakers was the BBC World News editor, John Williams. And he made some very good points. And what he said is that as the media, we must be wary of pretending to know too much. To give an example, that if you have someone, a correspondent, who's reporting from Cairo, that correspondent can't reflect what else is going on in another part of the country. And this is, again, very important, that the media or journalists don't assume to speak for a whole, you know, to give a whole picture when it only has a partial picture. Nothing is simple, nothing is black or white. Reality is much more complex. In situations, if you get things like in Iraq or anywhere else, you will find that sometimes both sides can carry out atrocities. There can be a tendency sometimes to simplify, to try and see something as good or bad. You want to see the goodies and the baddies. And very often you want. And I remember going to a presentation, I was quite struck because they had two journalists from Libya, one who'd been in Tripoli, and another journalist who'd been with the militias fighting Gaddafi. And what the journalist who'd been in Tripoli had been saying, that if the journalist spoke to a crowd when there was an official around, they would say, oh, we really like Gaddafi, we're very happy, etc. The moment the minder went out of earshot, they'd say, we hate it, atrocity, it's terrible. Now what happened with the journalist who was with the opposing force, the militia, they were fine as long as you wrote about things that they liked. But if you believed what the militia was saying, you would have had to believe that every or more than 3 times the amount of the Air Force aircraft that Gaddafi's people had been destroyed. And if you don't say what the militia like, they can not like it. So it can be pretty risky trying to be impartial as a journalist. Now, I'll just a few more comments, if I may. It was quite interesting. I was sort of looking through today and reading up what different people had to say about the media and how they were seen. And then I came across a site where various people in India were describing what they thought of the media, what they thought of the role. And I thought some of the points were quite good, and I would just mention some of them, and maybe you could all comment on them later on. So you know what some correspondents were saying, look, the role of the media plays a crucial role in shaping a healthy democracy. It is the backbone of democracy. The media makes us aware of various social, political and economic activities happening around the world. It's like a mirror which shows us, or strives to show us, the bare truth and harsh realities of life. It is the media which reminds politicians about their unfulfilled promises at the time of elections. TV news channels, with their heavy coverage during elections, can help people, especially who are less literate, to elect the right person in power. This also compels politicians to live up to their promises in order to remain in power. Then another correspondent said, television and radio have made a significant achievement in educating rural and uneducated masses by addressing them in their language. Coverage of exploitative malpractices of village heads and other abuses and moneylenders has helped in taking stringent actions against them by attracting the government's attention. Another comment said the media also exposes loopholes in the democratic system, which ultimately helps the government to plug these loopholes and make the system more accountable, responsive, and citizen-friendly. And I like this phrase, a democracy without media is like a vehicle without wheels. In the age of information technology, we are bombarded with information. We get the pulse of the world events with just a click of the mouse. The flow of information has increased multifold. The perfect blend of technology and human resource, in the case of journalists, has not left a single stone unturned in unearthing rampant corruption in politics and society. And then this person was saying we are all aware of what Tehelka did. If you remember, in India, Tehelka exposed a huge arms scandal. And thanks to the technology, this has brought us a kind of revolution in journalism. But then some of the negative side is that the impact of the media is really noteworthy. Excessive coverage or hype of sensitive news has led to communal riots at times. And then this person said the illiterates, which is not very nice way of saying it, are more prone to provocations than the literates. Constant repetition of the news, especially sensational news, that we heard from Dr. Barber saying, breeds apathy and insensitivity. The media should take utmost care in airing or publishing such sensational news. Commercialization has created stiff competition in the media. In order to outdo each other, print media have often gone one step further in publishing articles covering stories on sex and sensationalism. And the media experts say this is one of the means of attracting readers who are glued to TV. News channels which have cropped up swiftly in the past, and they believe this is a cheap form of journalism. So the conclusion is no one is perfect in this world, and this applies to the media. And they were saying it's not degrading the media, but this is pointing at the scope for improvement. The media is like a watchdog in a democracy that keeps the government on course, on track, and from being just an important informer and another correspondent saying it's become an integral part of our daily lives. The present media revolution has helped people in making informed decisions, and that has led to the beginning of a new era in a democracy. So these are just some thoughts to think about, and I'll hand over now.
Thank you very much, Rita. I think you have just shown image of both sides, that media can play a positive role while it can play negative role, particularly in some part of the world, as you mentioned, riots in India and sometimes in Pakistan as well it can happen. I'm sorry for people who are standing, but I hope you can come in and squeeze on this side. If Matthew, you can move your bag down, people can sit there. I'm very sorry for the, and actually this was mainly for journalists, but obviously we have got all sort of people. The vote is expected. Go there instead of standing here, if you don't mind. I know you are taking photographs, but it will be better in front. Vote is expected at 7:30. So what yeah, anybody who is tired already can leave. I think my next speaker is our main speaker, and I think he will speak for about 10 minutes or so, and then we will invite the MPs.
Perhaps you should ask David Anderson to speak first, just to make sure that he doesn't miss the vote.
No, I think it is 7:30, so we have 25 minutes. So, because I think it will be better if Yasmin and Dave can comment on both yours and Rita's question which you are going to raise as a role of the media. And then obviously Civil Kadri QC will speak about regulatory. So if you speak now. William Horsley is presently UK chairman of Association of European Journalists. He is a journalist, writer and broadcaster. He is also international director for Centre for Freedom of the Media in University of Sheffield. Can we welcome William Horsley?
Well, thank you very much. It's a great privilege to be with you today, and especially with tribunes of the people in the room. And just to refer to our previous speakers, Rita, as always, was very illuminating. I slightly take issue with her phrase, we were colleagues in the BBC many years ago. I think not more than 4 or 5 for either of us, but and referring back to Lord Hussain's explanation about how democracy works in the upper house in this country and the appointed House of Lords, I would remind you of the phrase which is central to the British Constitution, which is of course not written, which is, it works according to the good chaps theory of government. And this can be observed in many ways, including the Prime Minister's prerogative to set up various inquiries. I won't actually address the Leveson inquiry in any detail, because I really want to cast the thing much more widely, to look at the issue of my theory really being that the media in the broad sense are now more central to democracy, because it's all happening much faster and more people are involved than is generally realised. Also that it's more threatened than is realised. And my paradox I want to put to you is that the world now is enjoying more freedom of expression by infinite margin than ever before, and not more media freedom according to the best measures that we have. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But just very briefly on the Leveson thing, we have visitors here, and it's hard to convey the sheer turmoil and excitement, at least among the media and politicians. We have a saying in this country that media and the politicians do business, and then there are what we call ordinary people, or the rest of the world. There are essentially 2 ways of looking at the issues behind Leveson. Obviously some things are agreed. There was apparent criminality, there was corporate excess, and 40 people have been arrested so far. But there are really 2 ways of looking at it. One is the MP's point of view. I've spoken privately to a number of MPs who are absolutely seething with anger. They talk about blackmail, they talk about state capture, they talk about undue influence and so on. The other standpoint, which I think is also valid, is that this issue goes to the heart of the whole body politic, not just the press. But as we've seen from the evidence to Lord Leveson, it did involve the forces of the police and the politicians themselves, and it doesn't reflect at all well on that body politic. But the essence of it is that if the law had been applied, if the police had done their job, and if the politicians had not been willing to collude with this force in the land, then the situation wouldn't have evolved, which I think is a nice way into our topic, because the media and democracy to me are not, they are so closely allied. It's not an accident that the media described as the 4th estate, and they're an estate which is not elected, not necessarily even professionally qualified, but absolutely central to the direction of countries and the world. And I want to touch very quickly, I've only got about 5 or 6 minutes left, on 3 points. One is the point that the media now are not somebody else. We are the media. We have 2 billion people on the internet now. That will double in very few years, another 3 or 4 years. half of all those people are on, will be half of the present number will probably be on one social network alone, which is Facebook. And yet, the media freedom monitoring organizations in the world say that in 8 out of the last 9 years, the overall level of media freedom, that's to say, freedom from false imprisonment, harassment, assault and murder, has actually gone down. And last year was the first time for a long time that it went up slightly because of perhaps fragile gains in the Middle East and North Africa. And the other points are that the journalists are now more of a target than they've ever been, because precisely they are of their closeness to the centre of power. And in many situations, we all remember the fall of the Berlin Wall and the fact of the media explosion fueling the overthrow of the communist dictatorships there. We saw something similar in the Arab Spring. But we now see the media around the world not only more powerful, but also they have lost the aura that they had for many years, I think, for many generations, of being neutral observers. That again, I think, is a factor of the fact that the media are now in among the people, so to speak, and whether you're a terrorist group or a government or whatever, you have to get your hands on the means of delivery. And so the media themselves have become battlefields as never before. And I'll just describe some. I mean, we're talking about Pakistan, and there was one of the perhaps revealing examples is that of Salim Shahid, who was kidnapped, tortured and killed in June of last year when he was writing stories purporting to expose links between the security forces, the intelligence system in Pakistan and terrorist groups. And of course the chilling effect of this kind of thing is huge. I'm looking at my list of from UNESCO of killings of journalists over the last 4 years, and I'm sorry to see that Pakistan 24 is one of the highest figures. But just to mention a couple of other examples that shed light on it as well. Sri Lanka, of course, we're all familiar with the story of Asantha Wickrematunge, the Sunday newspaper editor who wrote his own obituary in advance, naming, or at least pointing the finger at the authorities, saying that he would be killed by government order, effectively. And another case in Mexico, which was late last year, of a very brave and effective journalist, Maria Elizabeth Macias Castro, who, and this is not untypical in Mexico, was reporting on the drugs cartels. She was kidnapped, mutilated, beheaded, and body left beside the road with a note saying that she'd been killed for what she'd posted on social networks. And my last point, I'll be brief, is about something which I think the public, the politicians and the media are not as aware as they should be. And again, it's another kind of paradox in a way. And that is that I do a lot of work. I actually worked in the BBC for more than 20 years as a correspondent, and mainly in East Asia as well as Eurasia and other parts of the Northern Hemisphere, not so much in the Commonwealth areas, but for the first time, because of the rise in not just the assaults and killings, but also the legal harassment and the unseen harassment and intimidation of journalists, the United Nations international system has focused on this issue on the side of journalists in a way that we've never seen before. And I'm sorry to say that UNESCO, which is the lead UN agency, because it's in charge of freedom of expression. They have put together, as a matter of fact, as a British initiative only a couple of years ago, a plan, a UN action plan on the safety of journalists and the issue of impunity. And this is a result of detailed reports and really harrowing reports down the years from the Director General of UNESCO, showing that because of this proximity between media and political power, when journalists are attacked or killed, they are very, very unlikely to find the perpetrators or bring them to justice. And this has encouraged more and more violence and intimidation. And it's sad to see that Lord Hussain mentioned India as the largest democracy in the world, and we pay tribute to that. But I was sad to see countries like India and Brazil and Pakistan and Mexico trying to pick holes in this plan, which would, for the first time, bring the work of the agencies together along the lines of the Millennium Development Goals, what they've done for poverty and development, in order, precisely because the intelligence of the UN Human Rights Committee, which are the top lawyers advising the UN, the Human Rights Council, which is the intergovernmental body, and UNESCO have worked out that this is something which will be decisive for the future of democracy worldwide. And I draw your attention to the fact, you may like to know that there is now an international day against impunity, November the 23rd, which marks the day a couple of years ago in the Philippines when 34 journalists were all killed, again, in a political context. They were accompanying a candidate who thought that he would have some protection by bringing the press with him, and that shows how the world has changed. It is no longer a protection, and the press themselves are not protected. To end perhaps on a more upbeat note, we heard a lot about the corruption of the media, and this is, of course, not new. It is a permanent facet of the whole concept of media. And what we're seeing in this new landscape is that the BBC, with the guidelines of the BBC, which are still much admired around the world and copied, the New York Times guidelines, indeed the guidelines of the Editor's Code of the Press Complaints Commission in this country. These are all templates and models, and yet we have at the same time the gutter press, and that's just the reality. And my last quote, I think, is from the UN experts, the Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Expression, who addressed this very question. And he said, you know, governments like to say, because journalists are irresponsible, they have to be controlled, contained, or directed. And he says, this is absolutely wrong. It is true that journalists should have high professional standards, but they must win the trust from the audiences that they're with. It is not up to governments to impose that, because that is censorship, and it leads to all the things that we know, totalitarianism and authoritarianism in all its forms. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, William. I think you have raised a very important question, that when media has become powerful and it makes opinion maker has become more dangerous for journalists to report. So let me ask Chairman of All Party Parliamentary Group on Third World Solidarity, Dave Nelson, to speak first, and then Yasmin Qureshi, Member of Parliament from Bolton.
Thanks very much, Mushtaq, and good evening, everybody. I apologise for being late, for being in a bill committee, which is part and parcel of the fun and games of this house. I agree completely with William when he said that a functioning media is a fundamental part of a decent society, as is a functioning democracy in a place like this. And it's also a functioning microphone.
अपना फखर साहब प्लीज इसको ठीक कर दें, please coming.
And clearly we know from what's been going on, not only has this place not been functioning properly for some time, but also certain elements of our media haven't been functioning properly for some time. Rita used the terms when she was quoting from, I think it was in the Indian press, that a media should be impartial and accurate. Well, we know that in this country we've got, in certain elements, a media that isn't impartial, it's very, very partial. And at times, it can be anything but accurate. And that is not in anybody's interest, it's certainly not in the interest of the people who work here. Rita also said the media is like a mirror. Well, I certainly hope not, because I wouldn't like to look in the mirror and see some of the media in this country reflected in terms of what we have. But we do know that media at the best is something really, really important. Some classic examples. The Vietnam War, without a shadow of a doubt, the Vietnam War would not have been as strongly campaigned against if the television hadn't exposed what went on. It was so effective that the powers that be made sure they never repeat that mistake again, because we never get live coverage of what's happening in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, because clearly people have a much, much better regard. The Watergate scandal, clearly without tremendous work from journalists, would never have been exposed. But then you've got the other side. You've got Fox TV as a classic example in America of your TV that's being used to drive through a political message. You've got some of the things that have been going on in this country. I won't go to the Murdoch thing, but people know very, very clearly where you've got some people as powerful as Rupert Murdoch, and we're not just wanting to be the story, they don't just want, they forgot about reporting the story, they want to set the agenda for the story, they want to say it. This is what you will do, and the truth is, some people at the highest levels in this country have been part and parcel of working with our agenda, and that to me has been a huge mistake for us, and so we've got to learn from. My first real awakening to the power of the media, and how the media can be slanted, was in 1984. I was a member of the National Union Mine Workers was on strike in 1984, and I was part of a team of people who had barricaded themselves in the miners' headquarters in Sheffield. And a reporter from the Daily Mirror, which would be a newspaper traditionally I would have put my faith in, came into headquarters and said to Arthur Scargill's wife, Mr. Scargill, I'd like to do an interview with you. And Anne Scargill said, I'm sorry, I don't do press interviews. He said, no, he said, I'm from the Mirror, it'll be a good interview. He said, look, I'm sorry, I don't do press interviews. And the funeral was persuaded the gentleman to leave, eventually. And the following morning, on page 2, was my exclusive interview with Anne Scargill. And all she said to him is, I'm sorry, I don't do press interviews. And that, to me, exposed journalism at its worst. And the perverse side of the same experience was when we had lots and lots of people going back to work every day, the one newspaper report that accurately was the Daily Telegraph. A newspaper traditionally I would have thought would never be anything like accurate because it would be given a slanted view. So it shows how you get different views from your experience. The other thing that I think one of the real problems we've had, and I hope that what comes up with Everton is not just a lesson for the media, but also the people in here, is the pressure on Democrats and the way they behave. And I'll give you a classic example. Michael Martin was the Speaker in this House. Michael Martin was made to carry the can for the mistakes that we collectively made around the expenses scandal. Because Michael Martin was the chairman, he was in charge. But Michael Martin carried out the wishes of people like me and people before me, and we put our hands up either in committees or in Parliament and said, Michael, we want you to do these things on our behalf. And when Michael Martin was faced with being stripped of his position as Speaker, a huge, huge embarrassment to a man who I had a lot in common with. Michael Martin was a sheet metal worker, I was a fitter. Michael Martin was a shop steward, I was a shop steward. Michael Martin spoke a strong accent. I mean, clearly I don't, but you know. Michael Martin was brought up in poverty, I was brought up in relative poverty. I didn't dare get up and say that what we do with this man is over the top. And the reason why I didn't dare do it wasn't because I'd done anything wrong, because I'd been proven through the mechanism in here, investigations, that I'd not done anything wrong with the expenses. The reason I didn't dare get up and say anything was the fear that the papers would say, he supported Michael Martin, therefore he must have his nose in the trough. And that is clearly not what the media should be able to get away with. It's not what we should have to get away with. We should have had more strength, I should personally have had more strength to stand up and say what you do with this man is over the top. And I think between us, we've got to get our act together. Not just ourselves, we've seen this week, 3 of the cornerstones of this country. If you went back 20, 30, 50 years ago, the press, the political system and the banks, people would say these are solid organisations, the cornerstones of the democracy. All of those have been found wanting in the last decade, and it's beholden on all of us to try and pull them back together. And particularly for this group, I think, why it's important for us, because we want the whole concept of this group is to give people from the developing world a space, a voice in this parliament, but also for us to help them in developing their own mechanisms. And I've done a lot of work in Kurdistan, and some of the journalists in Kurdistan that I've worked with have said very, very clearly that they're concerned because they know that some of the things they do is over the top. They make personal attacks on politicians, they make libelous attacks on politicians, and they accept they do that, but they do it to get an audience, to try and undermine the political figures in that country. You know, if we're going to have a genuine democracy, we're going to have genuine media, we need to be able for us to say to them, look, you can't do this, you shouldn't be doing that. We can't really say that a lot of legitimacy in this country because of the way we've been exposed for the last few years. So I hope that when we get to the end of the Levinson inquiry, and I don't want to see the press curtailed, I do want to see them act responsibly. And the vast majority of journalists do act responsibly. And the shame is that some of the people who run the papers have been shown quite clearly not to do that. And I think that unless we can get the situation where we put this right, then it's the detriment of all of us. So I thank you as always for coming to these meetings. It's always a pleasure to see the people in this room. Some more friends, some new friends, but thank you very much. And hopefully we can work together to try and resolve this issue.
Thank you very much, Dave, and thank you for your support as well to the Third World Solidarity, and I think you have become a very important and leading member. Can I ask Yasmin Qureshi, Member of Parliament from Bolton, to speak now? And I hope the bell doesn't go before we finish the meeting, but if it goes, I know you have to leave. Could you just...
Right, okay.
Yasmin Qureshi.
Good evening to everyone, and can I say that I agree with everything that the previous 3 speakers have said about the whole issue about the media and democracy. I think we all accept that democracy requires a good, strong, independent media, and I think nobody's running away from that. But as Dave Anderson just said, a very important thing is media has to be responsible as well. And I don't want to see Levinson inquiry sort of restricting the media or the press. But I think that if there is some way of improving the accountability, and there is some way of making some section of the media more responsible, then I think that will be a welcome suggestion. Now, I start from the premises of somebody who was, when I was a young student, studying international protection of human rights, and we had Lord Lester of Herne give speech. He was the tutor we had for on this particular Article 6 of the European Convention on Human Rights, freedom of speech. And it still sort of stays in my mind. He said, in an open society, we should be able to discuss everything, because only if you confront the difficult, the thorny issue, if you confront the difficult issues, can you as a society be more in fact at ease with yourself? So we shouldn't be afraid to discuss, you know, the racist in our society, or we should be able to discuss the people who've got a sort of hatred towards different groups or something. We should be able to touch all uncomfortable things, because only by that dialogue will we be as a society more comfortable. And that kind of struck in my mind. And then of course, you know, there's a famous quote from a French philosopher that I may not agree with what you say, but I'll defend your right to say so. So I start from that premises that I think media should be able to say what they want to say. But I think it's important that when you're also reporting on events, you must be honest and truthful. So whilst you can give an opinion, and while a newspaper can have a political opinion, you know, left, right, politics or whatever, I think when they are reporting on an issue of today, it should be honest and it should be accurate. And I think that is where most of the criticism at the press is levelled at, is the fact that they actually print some of the media, not all of it, some of the news, but actually print downright lies. And we know that, and I think it's that aspect of it that people are uncomfortable with. It's also the fact that sometimes intrusion goes to such a level that, you know, as you said, like Speaker Martin, I remember as an outsider sort of watching that, and I thought, this poor man is being he's being sort of, you know, driven out of Parliament. People are persecuting him, and as you said, it's because, you know, he was just a front face. I mean, it was a crackdown for everyone, and he was hounded out of his office. And another example that happened very recently with the comedian Jamie Kerr, who was, you know, being talked about his tax avoidance. Now, I thought, you know, I'm just looking at this, I'm thinking, all day long, everybody in the newspaper has been, all the media has been talking about it, all the newspapers go front headline, the Prime Minister's waded into this discussion. And I actually thought that was really, really unfair to home one person. There's an issue of tax avoidance that's been happening in our country for a long time. It's an issue that, you know, what they should be talking about, the whole issue about tax avoidance and about the fact that all these scams or schemes are done to try to minimise your tax liability. We should have a debate about that, and I think the media should expose everybody who's doing that. But to pick on one single person and consider that person the whole day long, I thought, you know, that's enough to drive anyone to commit suicide probably. And so I think it's that level of relentless picking on one individual that I think people find uncomfortable with. It's not the concept of mentioning people doing the wrong thing. I'm happy, I mean, if somebody says I've done something wrong, I don't mind that being in the newspapers, because obviously I have an office I bear. But I think, A, it should be true, and B, I think it should be put in a perspective and in a context, and people should be singled out for persecution. And I think that's where some of the criticisms of the media go. So for me, I think the media should be free, and I very much would defend the right to the media to be free and say what it wants to say. And I think we expect them to have political views. I think what we do expect is honesty, at least, in what they're saying. For me, that's really important, that what they say is accurate. And also that this victimisation that takes place in the media of individuals, I think is the thing that gives me the most concern, and the aspect of the media that I'm uncomfortable about. And really that's all.
There is a vote, but we expect both of MPs to come back if they have voted before 8 o'clock. I've got two speakers and then... thank you very much for coming. Thank you. I've got two announcements. I know that people are leaving, so I have got two announcements. One meeting on 10th of July in CPA room, which is a Commonwealth Parliamentarian Association in the Central Hall, and the meeting is on Afghanistan. It is at 6:30 by Commonwealth Journalist Association, so I hope you will all come to that. 6:30 on 10th of July on Afghanistan in CPA room. On 11th of July, I've got some information with Mr. Dr. Tariq Kokar will distribute. It is a meeting of Third World Solidarity in Boothright room at 6:30. I hope you all will come. Now, next speaker is come from very long way, and I know his students are waiting outside to listen to him. He's Dr. David Davis, who is teaching in Southern University of Mississippi. And he is on the tour, so he said he wanted to come, and I will just ask him to say a few words and then sit with Qadri QC. So David.
Thank you. I just want to say that we're privileged to be here today, and I would like to thank you and Ms. Payne and Mr. Horsley and all of the presenters for having us. We have I'll say only that we have students representing both the University of Southern Mississippi as well as universities representing Georgia State, the University of Louisiana at Monroe, and the College of Charleston. We're in a month-long course operating out of King's College, and we'll be here through the 28th and the 29th. And we so appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Thank you.
Good luck with your course and stay in United Kingdom, and I hope you will have a successful, and when you go back to USA, remember that there is a group which is working for peace, justice and tolerance and democracy in the world, so let's keep in touch with each other in future. And whenever
You should say that our David Davis is also regarded as the great